Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Criminal Mischief, the Art and Science of Crime Fiction. I'm your host, DP Lyle. Today, I have another question for you, submitted by a crime writer. And in this scene, a female police officer is sitting in her patrol car, and someone drives by and unloads a gun on her. Many of the shots miss. Several of them hit her body armor. One hits her humerus or her upper arm on the right side. That's the bone in the upper part of the arm. Another one hits the artery in that area and then penetrates into the chest after it damages a rib and it punctures a lung. Now these obviously are significant injuries. So the question is what happens? What's going to happen to this person? Are they going to survive it? What's the treatment going to be? What are they going to feel like? What's going to happen here? Well, we got three different injuries here, really. Let's get the simple one out of the way first. The slugs that hit the body armor aren't going to really do any damage, but they may cause some bruising. Um, Officers that have been shot in body armor will say that they have soreness and pain afterwards because it's like getting punched in the chest. Okay, fine. Tincture of time will take care of that. That's a medical term. Time will heal it. Uh, the second most serious injury would be the bullet that hit the humerus, the upper bone in the arm. That could fracture it. It could embed in it. It could do all kinds of things to it. This is something that may or may not require surgery. It may just require setting it and letting it heal. But if the bone is severely injured and shattered, cracked, bent out of shape, then an orthopedic surgeon sooner or later is going to have to go in and realign everything, and then that's going to have to be given time. It's going to take at least 4 to 6 weeks to heal, and it's going to take several months to heal completely. In which case, she would probably be either off duty or after a few months on light duty before returning to full work. It would be very uncomfortable and very painful, both before surgery and after surgery. But the most serious injury here is the bullet that did not hit the arm bone, but it hit an artery somewhere in the armpit area, is what the author wanted to happen. And then that bullet hit a rib, damaged a rib or two, and then punctured a lung. Okay. The rib fractures, let's go there first. You're not going to do much about them. They're going to take time to heal, and they will, but it's going to hurt. Every time you breathe, every time you cough, and God forbid if you sneeze, it's going to hurt like crazy. And that's the minor component of this constellation of injuries. Let's talk about the lung. Now, the bullet entered the lung and collapsed it. All right. Is that going to kill you? No, because we have two lungs and you can live with one perfectly fine. Obviously, there are exceptions here. The bullet itself may be retained inside the lung or inside the body, or it may pass out through and out of the body. These are called through and through gunshot wounds. Most likely, since it hit a rib, the bullet would have been damaged, would have been slowed down. It would have damaged the lung, but it would have remained inside the body, maybe even inside the lung tissue. So the danger here is not that you've got a lung that's not functioning properly. It's that you have one lung that is functioning properly and you have to protect it. What does that mean? So the first responders, whether they're the police officers or the paramedics show up or whatever, they're going to get her out of the car and lay her down because with a blood loss from the artery, we're going to talk about in a minute, she may be slipping into shock. But here's the key. You lay that person on the side of the injury. In other words, the bullet enters the right chest, you lay her on her right side. Why? Because you want gravity to be your friend. If this lung is damaged and is filling up with water, well, guess what? Fill up with blood, guess what? The airways are too. The tubes, all the bronchial tubes, all the way up into the trachea, they are going to be filling up with blood too. Laying on the back or laying on the left side, which might see intuitive here, actually allows that blood to slosh over into the good lung. And the next thing you know, now both lungs are filled with blood. And that is obviously a deadly situation. So you lay the person on the right side so that that other lung, the good lung, is uphill. And if the blood fills and comes into the airways, it's coughed out or it comes out the mouth and all that, but that lung is at least partially protected. That's very important at the beginning. What would happen later? Once she got to the hospital, they would probably put in, they'd probably take her to surgery and have to repair the lung, but not always. Sometimes it's a little nick and it's not as bad as that. But regardless, surgery or not surgery, during the post op period, what's called a thoracostomy tube or a chest tube would be placed. This is a tube that goes through the chest wall into the space between the chest itself and the lung. Okay? It's called the pleural space. And what that does is that then is attached to a suction device and it draws blood and air out of that area so that the lung reinflates and heals itself. And once it is able to do that and carry back on its functions, then that chest tube is removed. We like to leave these in as few hours as possible, especially a few days as possible. But it may take a week or 10 days for this to happen in severe injuries, and particularly after surgery. It may only take 24 to 48 hours before that tube is removed. But once that lung is re-expanded and has been repaired or has healed itself enough to function, then that tube comes out. Okay. And life goes on. Um, in this case, the bullet would have been damaged. It probably would have done significant damage to the lungs. Maybe even part of the lung would have to be removed. But at the end of the day, the surgeon would go in and fix what he could fix, stop all the bleeding, put the chest tube in, send the patient up to the post-op area and then the intensive care unit. She would have an endotracheal tube, which is a tube down into the trachea that allows breathing, be on a ventilator. How long would that be? Could be 12 hours, could be 24 hours, could be 96 hours, could be longer. Again, that you get rid of as quickly as you can. As soon as she can breathe on her own and doesn't need the support of that tube, you get it out, because chest tubes and endotracheal tubes have complications and you do not want to leave them in any longer than you wish. How would she do from just this injury's point of view? She'd probably do well, even if part of her lung was removed. And so she's got one good lung and three-quarters of another lung. She could still run marathons once everything heals up. So that's not a big issue. Once the initial trauma is taken care of and everything is settled, she would obviously be in the hospital for a week or so. She would recover at home for many weeks, if not months. It may be 6 months before she could return to duty. Again, this comes in 1,000 flavors, so it could happen almost any way that way. But what about this artery? Well, the artery that comes off the blood comes out of the heart into the aorta, and the aorta makes an arch through the chest. Well, that last branch of it is called the left subclavian artery, and that goes under the clavian, the clavicle, that's the collarbone, and it goes into the axilla, which is the armpit, and then it goes down the arm. So it goes from subclavian artery to axillary artery to a brachial artery, and they're really all the same. It's just called different things in different areas along its path. So in this case, I'm assuming it was either the axillary artery, axillary part of it, could be the brachial part of it, or the subclavian part of it that was damaged by this bullet. Okay. Um, before it hit the ribs and before it caused all the other things that we talked about. Well, this can be life threatening, of course. This is a big artery. This is a major artery. A lot of blood flows to your left arm. And if it is severely damaged, ripped open, big chunk taken out of it, it's going to bleed like crazy. And it could bleed so that she could slip into shock in a very few minutes. She could be unconscious by the time they showed up, and they have to get her down, get her horizontal. Again, gravity is your friend. Once you realize the lung was hit up on the left side, up on the right side, the side that was shot, So the left lung's protected, but you have to get in there and start controlling the bleeding, and that's at first with pressure. And hopefully that will stop the bleeding or control the bleeding long enough. Problem is, if it's in the chest, actually in the subclavian artery, you're in deep trouble, especially out in the field. You got to cut and run and get to the emergency room and the operating room as quickly as possible. If it's in the axillary area or in the arm area, which is the axillary artery or the brachial artery, you can often apply enough pressure to stop the bleeding. It's like getting your thumb in the dam and preventing the water from coming through. Well, you have to do that. You have to stop the blood loss, number one. And then the paramedics would do whatever they had to do, start IV, give fluids, maybe intubate the patient if she's not breathing well, and then cut and run and get to the emergency room. In the emergency room, then, surgeon would come in and look at that artery. Let's say it is the brachial artery. This would be repaired before they ever open the chest up, and they may even do that in the emergency room, that portion of it, and then go off to the operating room to get the lung and all that done. Chances are they would just cut and run and get in the operating room as quickly as possible. The surgeons and chest surgeons and vascular surgeons would come in and they would start repairing that artery. They would start repairing the lung. They would put in the chest tubes. They would do all the other stuff we talked about. But this is a major medical emergency. And can she die from this? You bet. And she can die in a few minutes from this. You bet. Can all this be repaired and everything return to normal? Absolutely. Again, the recovery time would be a week or so in the hospital, several months at home recovering, 6 months or so before returning to full duty. So you can see a simple little drive-by shooting has a lot of medical implications. And there's a lot of anatomy and physiology involved here. And so at the end of the day, the fractured ribs and the fractured humerus are the minor problems. Those are easy to deal with and shouldn't have long-term effects. The punctured lung, and particularly the damage to the artery, raises the stakes dramatically. And therefore, it requires people moving quickly, efficiently, getting things done. And then this young lady, this young police officer would survive all of this and return to duty. So it's a complicated question. And I've just laid out one scenario. This could go 100 different ways. That's the way medicine is. Things happen, but then things happen. And everything can evolve and everything can change. All kinds of complications can occur. She could have damage to the nerves in the arm, and therefore repairing the artery and getting all that in the bone and getting all that back together. She's still going to have a defect because the nerves don't play well after trauma. You can't just go in and sew them back together and expect them to work properly. They usually don't. So she could be paralyzed in that arm, and she could have loss of function. Maybe her hand doesn't work well. Depends on which nerves and how severely damaged they were. So you can see the complications there become real and important and may affect her ability to return to duty. If she can't use her left hand, she may not be fit for being a cop, at least out in the street. So she may be relegated to cold cases or office work or some other law enforcement activity, but probably not as a street cop. And that would be the nurse. That's another complication. Infections. Infections follow all kinds of gunshot wounds and all kinds of surgeries and everything. An infection sets in, whole different ballgame. Depends on the bug that causes the infection, how effective antibiotics were, how lucky you are, how good your immune system is overall, and a lot of other things as to how severe a post-gunshot wound infection can be. Most of the times nowadays, these can be handled very easily. A couple of weeks of antibiotics, everything cleans up and everything's fine, and that won't really complicate things that much. But they can also become septic and become deadly, and everywhere in between. So there's a lot here to think about, and a lot of ways to use this information to create a good storyline. And your storyline may be different than this, uh, but I hope some of these elements of this helps you tell your story a little better. And uh, you could have any one of these injuries or just similar injuries, and they may incorporate well into the tale that you are writing. So I hope this helps. Until we'll be back, obviously, with more fun stuff here. And until then, this has been Criminal Mischief, the art and science of crime fiction. And I'm your host, DP Lyle. And I'll be back with more stuff. Until then, keep reading, keep writing, keep having fun. And of course, try not to get caught.